Is this
How you doing?
No, good. Is this where you guys were thinking about putting the...
I think we're thinking here.
Okay, where is here? So, right, roughly, if we build it, will they come?
Okay. Roughly, if we build it, I think that's the case.
Okay.
Feel the dreams.
Exactly. Yeah.
Does this work?
Yeah.
Do you want to angle it with the capital on the back?
Yeah, that's what I was also thinking. Definitely an angle.
Anything else before I go back? You're great.
I have your AirPods, by the way.
Can I have them back?
Cool. You left them on the ground.
Oh. I thought you. Hi. How are you?
I think it's going to be spooky. We're the AVT.
Oh, yeah.
All these speakers. I'm looking right over you.
Guess I wear it so often.
Yeah, just lock it down and can around until we start there with that.
March anniversary yesterday.
No, I agree.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
don't
we'll do
think,
it
I
that
don't
way.
think we're necessarily doing that.
I think what the plan is.
All throughout the day.
Oh, okay.
So they're done with the
I think the plan is that right now I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Okay, so because people are already doing it. And then have like them do that for like a little bit. Like maybe a little bit. And then you're welcome. Because you're also
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll just put
yeah, and then whoever's ready, I'll just have them go.
And you happen to come out when we're outside as well. And I was like, yeah, so. You can join lobby meetings after if you want, or you can go.
I will like
Yeah, good thing, but terrible. Oh, and the thing about on the side is about like house, but on that side about the house. Lydia. Lydia is the art part.
So get out of there, do a welcome. Or maybe bring your dog to time installation is and give you a moment to observe it. Guys are friendly.
I swear to God, I promise I did not ask you. I'll come by. Are you? No? Okay. Hi, Charlie. Sorry, I just got really scared. I was like, oh my God. Hi, sorry. Right, it's a shame that
Hi! Oh my God, yes.
Because that all means we're really aggressive with our
You want to see a video of when I showed Saturday? Brianna. Do you know Brianna?
Yeah.
I don't want to block.
Right now, nothing really. Yes, I'm just right
You're just looking at me?
I wasn't looking at it. I've already talked to her once.
Okay, yeah, she's
I'm trying to help you guys.
I was trying to help you.
No, I wasn't looking through you. I was looking right through you.
Okay.
Hey, Sam, you want to do this work around a question?
They're saying, I think we're getting close.
Yeah, okay. I think we're going to do
Do you remember me? He said way back there. What? That's what I was trying to get.
Yeah, we do need to go.
We're starting. People are
Trying to-
so hard to wrangle.
I know, but it's going to make noise. Build it next time. Again,
Jackie, we're
because
Team Tylenol. That's our team. Of course it's fine. All right, guys.
were you going to do it? You gonna do it?
Right here, angle that
do
way.
that?
So what's the line?
It's better if you could come out of it
Like
for everyone.
here?
Because if you pin yourself here, then no one can go around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Out of it. We can make the line work for visually.
Somebody tried this one.
I want to say shit. I'm not going. Yeah, well, we got on button.
And then it just goes.
Should go. I want to make sure this move a little through. I speed it around.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
You have to come up,
Hi, everybody.
otherwise,
If you guys could just kind of gather like here-ish.
you guys, Hussein, you're going to have to get up here, otherwise people are going to get in front of you, so. Yep. Here, Hussein. Just get like here. Just come out a little bit because you're going to, just like right there. And that's good. Because there's going to be people all around, so the Capitol will be there, so it's good. Thank you. Do you still have this mic?
Yeah, sorry. It was supposed to rain today, but good news, it didn't. Okay. It's not over yet. You're right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Is this on? Hello? JP. Hello? Hi, everybody. First of all, I just want to thank you guys all for coming out to our little kickoff event here. I'd especially like to thank Center City Public Charter School for coming over, walking over during your lunch period. I think it's really vital that we include all ages in this conversation about gun violence, and especially being here in DC, making sure that we include those kids who are actually, experiencing gun violence and experiencing what this means and the reality of it here in the city in DC. So I just really want to thank you guys all for coming out here. First, I just want to, explain a little bit of what this is here and what it means. So as part of that, I just want to introduce the artist who can better explain what exactly this is and what it means. Jacqueline, here you go.
Hey everybody! Hi, so my name is Jacqueline von Edelberg. I am an artist activist from Chicago, Illinois. But most of all, I am a mom. I am a mom of a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. And just as a mom, I cannot watch another kid come home in a body bag. I just can't do it. So what you see here is the culmination of a year-long project inspired by the March for Our Lives kids a year ago. And what it is 13,000 pieces of orange fabric that represent all the kids who have been killed from Sandy Hook until now. At the end of this section is actually a special section that kids at the University of Pittsburgh made after the Tree of Life shooting, and that section has the names of all of the victims of that synagogue shooting embroidered, and the words Tikkun Olam, which in Hebrew means repair the world. We're also delivering with the letters that people from across the country have written to senators, these special pom-poms that were made by kids across the country. And that special pom-pom, I don't know if somebody has it and can read it, it essentially says, this year, dear Senator, 1,600 children are likely to die based on any inaction. And you hold in your hands right now 16 pieces of fabric, and that represents the lives that you can save by voting yes on Senate Board 12, for S42. 42, right? S42, right? And it says, what will you do? This here, this fabric, it is fabric. It's based on nothing. And if we, as young people in this country, armed only with chalk and fabric and scraps of paper, can make our voice heard, then that is exactly what we're going to do. With this piece of artwork is usually a chalk component, which we can't do right now because we're on federal property. But people are writing the names of victims or survivors or schools that have suffered gun violence in chalk, or simply the words enough. And the aim of this project truly is if we could turn every sidewalk into America into a personal vehicle for protest, that would be something. So here's the CTA, beyond what the senators are supposed to do. All you have to do is write the name of a victim, a survivor, or a school that has suffered gun violence, or simply the word enough. Take a picture, take a video, upload it to social media, and nominate 5 people to do the same, just like the ALS Bucket Challenge. And I think if we did that, if we empowered everybody around the whole country to turn this into a public protest, I think our voices could be heard in an even more dramatic fashion than they are right this second. So super props to March for Our Lives, and thanks for including us in your moment. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
So, real quick, just thank you, Jacqueline, for coming out and bringing this project here to DC. After we have everyone speak, it'd be really great if you guys can add your own notes to this art installation and just personalize it, and it'll be up all day. So this is something that everyone who walks by and is visiting the Capitol and those who work here in the halls of Congress can see, and it would be a very special touch if everyone could add their piece to that. So just real quick, I want to talk about what this project is and what it means for all of us. So on a personal note, a year ago yesterday, I was home in California organizing a little march that I thought was going to be 200 people showing up with 4 of my friends from elementary school that I had not talked to since elementary school. It was a very weird moment. And since then, we got 2,000 people to show up to that march in a district where gun control in general and gun violence prevention has never been a winning issue and has actually kept an anti-gun violence prevention congressman in power for over 30 years. We were able to get 2,000 people to march in that city, and were able to vote him out in this past November election. Woo! Since then, and I think this is a kind of a metaphor or an example of how this entire movement has progressed since, March 24th of 2018. You have organizers around the country who organize their local walkouts and organize their local marches. And with this project, we were able to empower those same organizers 1 year later to collect letters from every single state across the country, mail them to DC, which we are delivering today. We had over 6,000 letters mailed to us directly from constituents to their senators, asking them to pass universal background checks. As part of that, we have over 30 meetings today where students, just like you, some of you in the crowd actually were in those meetings, who were directly lobbying those Senate staffs and actually met with some senators this morning, asking them to pass universal background checks. So last year we marched, this year we voted them out. And now we're continuing to show up here in DC. We're working together with over 100 grassroots organizers and organizations across the country in coalition in order to finally have a world without gun violence. It's all incremental. It's one step at a time. You can't get everything all at once, but we were able to vote people out this past November, and now today we're able to meet with them. And we're able to directly deliver these letters from their constituents, so these senators can't just come to DC and hide from those voices of their constituents who care about gun violence prevention, because we are here in DC and we will continue to hold them accountable. So I just want to thank you all for being here today and for being those physical representations of those constituents back home, and making sure that that passion and the care that those constituents have in their home states is translated through you and serving as their representatives here to ensure that we can finally end gun violence. So, again, I just want to thank all of our partner organizations across the country, over 100 partner organizations of students as young as 8 years old writing letters and mailing them into us. I want to thank all of the March for Life's DC volunteers who have been sorting these thousands of letters pretty much every day for multiple hours for the last week. It was a big task, but mostly I want to thank you guys for being here and for being those representatives and for being here to deliver those letters and making sure that their voices are heard. So it's a nice cumulative event for us. It kind of shows the progression of what March for Life has become. And now I want to introduce Amos from Team Enough, one of our partner organizations that has been extremely helpful in this event and has always supported us as young people, and we love working in coalition with them. So now, Amos, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Amos Jackson III. I'm a graduating senior at Howard University, where I serve as Howard University Student Association president. And today is nostalgic because a year ago today, we organized hundreds of Howard University students to join you all for the March for Our Lives rally here in DC. And that was there when I met people from the Brady campaign and I asked how I can get involved. Because I attended American Heritage School like 20 minutes from Parkland. And I remember I had friends who lost neighbors, who lost people that went to church with them. They lost teachers, they lost football coaches, and Parkland served low-key as our rival in high school when it came to basketball and other sports. And so that community was my community. Even though I grew up in West Palm Beach, but going to school in Delray, and not too far from Parkland, right down Lyons Road, it really hit home for me. And being so far away from DC, I knew I couldn't do anything in Florida, but I found my niche here with Team Enough and with the Brady campaign, and we were able to form an executive council of over 13 people. And those 13 people, since this time last year, have been lobbying, creating report cards, meeting with members of Congress. Aaliyah Eastman has testified before Congress at least 3 times and made her story known across America. And although I wasn't in the classroom, I feel for Aaliyah, and also recognizing that it's from churches and synagogues to nightclubs to Fort Hood to members of Congress to people in the streets that we have to continue to fight for to end gun violence. Because we're tired, and enough is enough. And we've cried enough tears, we've had enough candlelight visuals. It's time for us to continue to do the work, because it's not going to end today, because the fight continues every day. Because we have, in our Declaration of Independence, it says that unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if someone is not alive, they can't attain those rights. And so it's on all of us, from the babies all the way up to the adults, that we continue to fight for this country, for our safety, because it's on us, and we're going to make sure that we fight for our country. And thank you for March for Our Lives for allowing me to be here and stand in alliance with you all. We're going to continue to work with you all, and from Team Enough to everybody that's not represented here today, we thank you and we continue to work with you. Thank you.
Okay, so again, thank you so much for speaking. We love working in coalition with Team Enough. They're such a strong partner of ours that has always been so supportive, especially out here in March for Our Lives DC. Thank you. We cannot thank you enough. Now I'd just like to introduce real quick David Hogg from March for Our Lives National, just to speak a little bit to how this movement has changed and his thoughts on that.
First of all, thank you to all of you for being here today. Thank you for making us realize, as students from Parkland and students around the country, that were galvanized by the shooting at my high school and our high school. Thank you for helping us realize that we will not be forgotten. Because oftentimes in instances of gun violence, that's the thing that people worry so much about, is we feel so isolated in these situations. We feel that oftentimes, even for the parents that weren't at school that day, or the siblings that weren't at school that day, that still went through a lot, they feel like they're not included in these conversations. And I want us to realize one thing. None of us should fucking be here today. I'm sorry. This should have been taken care of a long time ago. None of these ribbons should be here anymore. They shouldn't be here in the first place, because all of these people should have been the last time. Raise your hand if you've been affected by gun violence, or you know someone that's been lost as a result of gun violence, including suicide. Your pain is our pain. Your suffering is our suffering. And what I'm not here to tell you today is how we're going to go and over-incarcerate our youth and over-police our youth to solve gun violence, because that's not what's going to work. Yesterday, I was in New York City. Or 2 days ago, I was in New York City with an amazing woman named Erica Ford that works with an organization called Life Camp. And when I was with Erica, who we work in alliance with a lot of the time in New York, they have a program that works through teaching students nonviolence and peace as a lifestyle. And they've been able to stop everyday shootings in their community over the past 20 years and have significantly reduced gun violence. And oftentimes I think to myself, in what ways are Parkland different from many other communities in the United States? So I asked Erica that, and she said, well, I'll show you. So as I walked out with Erica, she showed me the Police Athletic League, the PAL, and how it's supposed to be a place for students to come and relax, and a place for students in the area that don't have things to do after school when they're on break or they're on a weekend to come and relax. But over the past several months, that place has been shut down and not open. So many of the kids that live in public housing around there, that live in the projects around there, have nowhere to go. Yet, right next to it, there's a police tower that's manned 24/7 and costs about $500,000 a year to run from the city of New York. Yet they can't open up a few basketball courts for the kids to play on. And that's not okay. And what I want us to realize is that we have to realize that even though we may have all gone through different things in different communities, and Parkland doesn't look like most parts of America, and many other communities don't look like any other part of America, we can come together through our shared suffering and our trauma and the individuals that we've lost to make sure that there are no more. Because nobody can be left out of this conversation, because the second someone is left out of this conversation is the second it's not solved. Because if we only end gun violence in one zip code, we're not ending gun violence. If we only talk about new laws when it comes to gun violence and not the real reason why gun violence continues to occur in so many communities, like systemic racism, economic oppression, and a lack of education in their communities, we are not ever going to be able to solve gun violence. If we don't continuously raise the voices of youth across the country, from every community, of every skin color and every ethnicity and religion, we are not going to be able to solve gun violence until we come together and realize this isn't an issue that just affects one zip code. This is an issue that affects every zip code. Yet in Congress, we only see those zip codes represented by typically one group of people, and we have to stop that. We have to make sure that all of our voices are heard. We have to go out there and protest and fight for our survival. We have to organize for our survival, because we're not going to be able to survive any longer unless we start doing that. And even though universal background checks polls higher than puppies, it's not passed. We have to ask ourselves why. And the reason why it's been allowed to continue that way is because the corrupt system that we've allowed to be fostered by our elected officials in Congress, that continues to put money over lives, that continues to put the death of our children literally below anything else. Because if we're letting our children die in a country that we call the greatest country on earth, then how can we call ourselves the greatest country on earth? If we're constantly allowing the slaughter of our youth and our future, how can we allow this to continue? If we're not teaching our children the way of peace and nonviolence because we don't even practice that ourselves, why are we even trying? Right? So what I ask today is for us to have a conversation. For us to have a conversation about gun violence and the real causes of it, and how even though extremist protection orders and universal background checks are just the beginning, they are certainly not enough, and we are not going to stop there. We're not going to stop until we have proper funding for violence intervention programs that don't over-incarcerate our youth. We're not going to stop until we acknowledge the fact that black and brown and undocumented communities are disproportionately affected by gun violence, because oftentimes they can't talk about it. Because I've met individuals that have told me, when I'm in New York City, for example, when the difference between me living in Parkland and them living in Jamaica and New York is that if I get shot, I can go to the hospital and not be worried about being taken to the precinct. I met a young man recently who was shot in a drive-by, and the first day that he got home from the hospital, the police came to his house and started treating him like the suspect, even though he was shot in a drive-by. I don't understand how we allow those things to continue. That individual also had their phone taken away when they're in the ambulance, violating their Fourth Amendment rights, with no probable cause and no warrant for having that phone in the first place. That they're not included in this conversation because of the zip code that they live in. And that's not okay. We have to realize that only using each other, only using youth as tokens within multi-million-dollar nonprofits is not going to solve this issue. Only using people across the country as tokens because of the community that they come from is not going to solve this conversation. What we have to do is work together with our shared suffering and realize the only thing that will solve us is us loving each other and to stop hating each other, because there's so much hate in this country right now. There's so much of it, and that's what drives this violence. That's part of what drives this division. And the things that I'm interested in is, for example, not how do we get Donald Trump out of office. The thing that I'm interested in is how do we stop the very thing that creates Donald Trump in the first place? White nationalism and white supremacy. How do we stop the xenophobia and the lack of education that he has in the first place? So I think today is a time that we reflect on the past year, where we've registered over 85,000 voters as youth across the country, where we reflect on the fact that we passed basically more gun laws in this time period than have ever been passed in this time period before in American history. We reflect on the fact that we voted out more NRA-backed politicians than ever before in American history. And this is just the beginning, and we are just getting started. And we are not going to stop until no other child, no matter the zip code, no matter where they live in the United States, has to fear gun violence anywhere. Thank you.
Again, thank you, David, for speaking to us, the perspective of a student who survived Parkland. Now, as David had mentioned, you know, certain communities of color do not get the same representation by Congress, and they don't get the same representation and the ability to be free of gun violence as many, you know, privileged Americans do, typically on an everyday basis. And one of those communities that's particularly disenfranchised is DC. You know, students in DC have no representation, voting representation in Congress. They have no voice here in Congress making those federal laws that affect them every single day. DC particularly has a bad gun violence issue here. Now, I'd like to introduce someone who could speak more to this and speak from the perspective of a student here in DC. She represents an organization called Pathways to Power based out of Thurgood Marshall Academy. This organization was founded after 2 students from the school were shot and killed here in DC. And since then, they've persevered and they've continued to push, you know, for the ability to end gun violence in their different forms of advocacy. And I think it's really important that every time that we talk about gun violence here in DC and we talk about it at a federal level, we also acknowledge that there are students here in DC and communities here in DC that are affected every single day and literally have no voice in Congress. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nayana from Pathways to Power.
Hi, so my name is Nayana Marina from Parkland. I go to school in Ward A, where I'm sure some of you all live. I'm a high school senior, so I know this is about as much as you. I am here on behalf of the underrepresented group in this fight. I am here for the tragic individual black and brown stories who have gotten lost in national news of mass shootings. I'm here for the 36 people that have lost their lives in the battle of survival in the first 80 days of 2019 in Washington, D.C. I am here so no one else has to let their grief of losing a loved one be the catalyst for change. My name is Nayana Martin, and I am a senior at Thurgood Marshall Academy in Washington, D.C. This city has experienced many changes, like high-rise condos, shopping centers, and more organic grocery stores in places where no one can afford them. But one thing hasn't changed is that people are still dying at the hands of the gun epidemic. It doesn't matter how many condos and Starbucks you put up, the truth still stands. We don't feel safe traveling to and from school. We don't feel safe getting around DC. And we are tired of normalizing this fear. In the 36 lives lost in the district this year, one was a familiar face for me, an old friend I met during middle school, Matthew Washington. Matthew was a friend to many, a brother, lover, and father. Matthew was shot in broad daylight around 3:50 p.m. at Friday in the 100 block of Harry Thomas Way Northeast on February 16th, the day before his birthday. Matthew's site of death was not in a dangerous neighborhood or at the wrong time. He was in the vibrant community in the heart of Eckington, right next to the area's brand new apartments. People don't think that everyday gun violence happens in nice neighborhoods or in the middle of the day. That it only happens when someone who looks like me, or you all, is doing something wrong or is in the wrong place. But gun violence can reach anyone, even when they are in the right place doing the right thing, even in the part of the city where no one expects it. A few classmates and I founded a student-led activist group called Pathways to Power. It was born as Empower out of the group of 2 students, our friends and classmates, Paris Brown and Zaire Kelly. We work to change the narrative and to make sure that young people have a seat at the table for the decisions that affect them. We have focused on the factors that contribute to gun violence, such as poverty, community wellness, and mental health. Gun violence isn't just about the gun. It is also about the reasons why people pick up a gun. We pick this fight not because it is easy, but because it isn't. DC's fight isn't just about stricter gun laws, because most of the guns used to commit crimes in DC are obtained illegally. DC's fight is about strengthening common sense gun laws across the country, so it isn't as easy to transport illegal guns into my community. DC's fight is about making sure that resources and supports are readily available for our most vulnerable citizens when they need it the most. That jobs, housing, and opportunities provide hope for the citizens of DC. That families who have been in DC for generations have the tools they need to stay in DC. I have spent the day lobbying for help from other state senators. Although I can see the U.S. Capitol from my high school library, there is no one there who represents my voice with a vote. The decisions that are made in Congress affect my everyday life, yet no one is there to represent me and the problems DC faces. Today, standing here, I tell you that I exist, and the lost lives in DC impacts me, and they should impact you too.
Thank you so much, Nyana, for sharing your perspective as a DC student. Thank you. Now, real quick, I just want to thank everyone who spoke here today for coming out and for sharing your story and your perspective with us. It's vital that we work on this issue in coalition and with different communities that are affected and not affected together to make sure that this is something that we are able to effectively end. Now, I want to invite all of you to add a note to our art installation here with the name of someone you lost or just a special note you'd like to add. In addition, we also have t-shirts in the back that we would love for you all to wear. We're going to have about 20 minutes where you can, shuffle around, get a t-shirt, add a note to the art installation, and then we'll regroup for delivery instructions for when we're actually going to go to the Senate offices and deliver those letters. But please, if you can, please wear a t-shirt. We want to make sure that we're showing up in solidarity and that all of the offices that we visit today and all of those that see us here know that we're in this fight together and that they're going to need to mess with all of us if they want to mess with us. So please, the t-shirts are in the back, so please pick those up. We have enough for everybody. Just make sure you grab one. And then please add a note to the art installation. And thank you all for coming. Stick around, please.
You got two. What's wrong with you?
Should I change
If not, that what do you get?
Oh, a lot of good stuff.